as well as raising awareness and changing mindsets.
We were not happy selling our organic food in styrofoam containers and plastic. So we decided to begin importing and using compostable food containers. We have reduced the waste that we produce, and we hope that this serves as an example to other businesses, large and small.
In the supermarket business, we have historically created large amounts of plastic waste. We are now encouraging our customers to refuse plastic packaging throughout. More and more people are stepping up and bringing reusable bags.
We only need to make a firm decision to start taking action. And when we all do our bit, collectively, we create huge changes.
As we are learning to appreciate and enjoy our outdoor playground, we feel sad to see all the plastic bottles and styrofoam in our seas. Now that we have realized that plastics are a threat to our environment, we are becoming more conscious of our decisions.
We live in an incredible place. Our islands are worth protecting.
By changing our mindset and leading by example, we become more comfortable in spreading awareness to our friends, family and community of the many reasons why it is important to take good care of our environment.
It's up to me. It's up to me.
It's up to me.
It's up to all of us.
It is up to all of us to make these changes. And when more people join our efforts, we ensure a more sustainable future.
One UN estimate put it that each year about 13 million tons of plastic is dumped into the oceans. And it is estimated that by the year 2050, we'll have more plastic than fish in our oceans. And so that kind of statistic is not sustainable at all for our environment. And so we have to do something. And that is why on World Environment Day, it is a People's Day where we have to do something about protecting and conserving our local environment.
CFBC are observing World Environment Day that's coming on this year, that's coming on the 5th of June, under the UN theme of beating plastic pollution. On pollution of the environment, we cover broadly three areas or three types of pollution. One is land-based, air-based and water-based pollution. In all of those areas, plastic pollution is a problem, where plastic pollution can overwhelm our landfill and other areas where they accumulate as point sources. We also have where much of the plastic, once we have heavy rainfall, will make their way into the sea. And when the plastic is burnt, we get air pollution coming from plastic.
Give us an environmental studies assessment of what you see here.
Okay, over here you see some plastic waste that has washed up from the ocean. This can be hazardous, as if it's located on the beach, it shows that there's a lot more in the ocean because, as I said, it is washed up.
Mangrove swamp is home to many types of animals, and they come back to their habitats and they see all these plastic, all these foreign objects that they've never seen before. They might eat it, that could potentially choke them, killing them off, and that lowers like the species diversity, you know, the amount of animals that actually live in the mangrove area.
We're on Keys Beach, and if you just step onto Keys Beach, so you walk, you hit grass, as soon as you hit the sand line, you're going to see tons of bits of plastic.
And so it ends up into the waterways, and we know, of course, that the sea brings it back on land. And then you have to think about the organisms eating it. And then it's stored in their fatty tissues, and it bioaccumulates. And then over a period of time, then you could have biomagnification as it moves up the food chain. It could be eating other organisms that these chemicals have been stored in their fatty tissues, and then we could get sick. So you have different illnesses that could come about from it, especially different cancers. Plastic is highly toxic for the human body, and so then we have to deal with that as an issue.
We're here at Greenleaf Hydroponics Farm, and we're talking about plastic and plastic pollution in the environment and how dangerous it is to our ecosystem and our plants and nutrient cycling. Things like centipedes and your insects in general, they are the ones that actually break down the once living matter, return it to the ecosystem in a nutrient cycling format, which we call the detritus cycle. So they're very, very important. Plastics impact them directly, and when we have situations where we have organic matter trapped or we have voids in soils created from large amount of plastic deposits, then we have that disconnect between the detritivores and the organic matter. So they slow the rate of return. If the plants can't grow effectively, animals can't eat effectively, and if they can't eat effectively, it affects us as well as the animals.
On this table, we are showcasing biodegradable, reusable alternatives to conventional plastics.
Alternatives to plastic use include cloth bags, and I'm sure that we can recall those bags that we used when I was growing up. We took those bags to the shops to purchase our bread and our groceries. We have bags made from jute or burlap, and you can also use bamboo containers. We can switch to glass bottles, ceramic containers. We can reuse instead of having our plastic bottles and just throwing them away after each single use, we can also have multiple use of our plastic bottles.
We can also educate the general populace about the use of cosmetics. These cosmetics, many of them contain microbeads, particularly facial scrubs, lotions, toothpaste.
So we have to start thinking about things like sorting garbage. So you have your compost, which would be your chicken bones and your rice and the leftover bread and all that, separate apart from your aluminum cans, from your glass.
Good day and welcome to Working for You. I am Leslie Williams. I thank you very much for joining us for today's program. Your company is well appreciated. Today I have officials from the Ministry of International Trade, Industry, Commerce and Consumer Affairs. They are my special guests on today's program, and we will be having a lively discussion about those subject matters. I would like to introduce first to my immediate right, Mr. Stuart Laplace, who is the Director of the St. Kitts and Nevis Bureau of Standards. Mr. Laplace, welcome. I also have with me the Director of Trade, Mr. Sean Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence, welcome. And the Director of Consumer Affairs, Mr. Paul Quealy. Mr. Quealy, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Williams.
We have also just been joined by Mr. Philip Brown, who is the Director of the Department of Industry, Commerce, and Small Business Development. Welcome, Mr. Brown. The COVID-19 pandemic presents the world with an unprecedented public health challenge. Measures to curb the spread of the disease have shut down large swaths of the world economy. Worldwide demand for medical products to fight the pandemic is unprecedented. All countries depend on international trade and global value chains to source these products. This is challenging in light of ongoing disruptions to international transport, particularly air cargo, which often goes together with passenger travel. So, gentlemen, while we are here to discuss what is happening in the Ministry of International Trade, Industry, Commerce and Consumer Affairs, we are well aware at this present time the global climate, that of the COVID-19 pandemic and how it has affected international trade, industry, commerce, and consumer affairs, consumer behavior, and all of that. But before we touch on those things, I would like you to give me a general overview in terms of what your department does, starting with Mr. Laplace.
Thank you, Leslie. With respect to the Bureau of Standards, what we do is to facilitate trade. So we ensure that the goods that are coming in and the goods that are going out are following the relevant standards, whether they are food standards or the international standards. And that way we minimize a lot of risk and bottlenecks in terms of moving the cargo from point A to point B. From time to time you might have international producers would reach out to us concerning any issues with any labeling requirements that St. Kitts and Nevis may require before the items are brought here. So there's a lot of behind the scenes work that we do on the Bureau side to ensure that the trade is being facilitated in a timely manner.
Mr. Lawrence, the Director of Trade, I know that all of these are connected. They are linked. International Trade and Industry and Commerce and Consumer Affairs. It's one ministry because really and truly they are all interconnected.
Correct.
Mr.
Yes,
Lawrence.
yes. Before I go into the nitty-gritty of what we do in the Ministry of Trade, I'll first start off by reading our mission and perhaps our vision. It will set the context for how we go forward in my discussion. The mission of international trade is to strengthen cooperation with the global community, promote the country's contribution to multilateral trade organizations, and provide opportunities for economic investments by developing a range of programs aimed at promoting fair and accessible trade. Our vision is to strengthen policy making and implementation in accordance with the strategic, political, social, and economic interests of St. Kitts and Nevis. Within the context, what we can gather is that in international trade, our job is to facilitate the movement of goods and services. And in doing so, we must do so within the global context. Because at the end of the day, the movement of goods and services in every country must be within international trade agreements. So therefore, there are certain rules and regulations that must be followed. And in our department, what we do is basically facilitate trade within these specific guidelines, at the same time balancing our national policies and goals. That is basically what we do in our department.
Right. Mr. Quilly, the man responsible for consumer affairs.
The Consumer Affairs Department was established to inform, educate, and empower consumers to protect themselves when conducting transactions in the marketplace. We are the only agency with responsibility for consumer advocacy within the Federation, and in light of this, we were given the mandate of ensuring that the rights of consumers are defended and that a competent and fair marketplace is maintained. Some of our responsibilities include engaging in market research. We conduct surveys to get public perception on certain consumer issues that might be on the forefront at the time, a given time. One at this moment that we are working on with SPDC is a consumer survey, business survey, to find out how COVID-19 has impacted small businesses. We provide complaint resolution services, normally by telephone or walk-ins, but preferably at this moment in time, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are more leaning towards email complaints. We ensure that businesses comply with the laws of the Consumer Protection Act of 2003. We offer education services to the public through radio programs such as our Consumer Corner radio program, and we also go into the schools, and we have created a consumer primary school quiz competition that is conducted annually in the month of March. I think I'll stay here for the moment and I'll let Mr. Brown continue.
Thank you, Mr. Quilly. Now Mr. Brown, the Director of the Department of Industry, Commerce and Small Business Development. Mr. Brown, it's an overview of your department.
Thank you, Leslie. And as you quite rightly would have put it, the Department of Industry and Commerce is focused on business development. And so, aptly and strategically placed in the Ministry of International Trade, because all of the various departments are interconnected, we are responsible in a way for that virtual hand-holding type activity for our business community. As such, we are facilitating and stimulating and all of those terms business. We do have within the sector some of the larger businesses and manufacturers that we would see them as in the enclave sector, but we also have the smaller manufacturers. And in order to facilitate this, while there is a focus on things like exports and so on, we realize that there is a great need for some additional focus on small business. Hence, the establishment of what was NED, National Entrepreneurial Development Division, up until November 2018, when we would have evolved into what is now the Small Business Development Center. And that's an organization that is more in tune to perhaps serving businesses in this current age with services such like business plan development, training, general management and guidance, advice, etc., assistance with accessing incentives. And over the past 5 years or so, we would have seen hundreds of entrepreneurs, small enterprises, coming through our doors and in fact finding assistance via our collaboration with our regional and international partners, because it is important for us to note that we don't swear to have all of the answers, but one of the services that we do provide is that networking, connecting type service where we would engage our regional colleagues and partners, the CDBs, the Caribbean Exports, etc., to ensure that we provide the best possible service and direction, assistance for our business community, our entrepreneurs and our manufacturers, etc.
Yeah, Mr. Brown, thank you. I want to start the next question, or throw this question to Mr. Laplace. Mr. Laplace, your department deals with standards, quality assurance. Now, your department is a very important one, because we can't have trade, we can't have industry, we can't have commerce and consumer affairs without talking about standards. Standards are important when you are dealing with these areas. Now, I know that the Bureau of Standards has 5 departments. Could you tell us what these 5 departments are, and a little bit in terms of what they do, in terms of ensuring standards and quality assurance?
Okay. Thank you. At the Bureau, we have the multipurpose laboratory a part of our construct. So we have a chemistry department, we have a metrology department, we have a microbiology department, we have a standards department, and we now have a air quality department, which is the newest addition to our construct. Now, in metrology, that is the science of weights and measure, and that department deals with calibrating all equipment that are used in trade. So if you go to the supermarkets or you go to the gas stations, you would notice that there would be some stickers being displayed there to verify that we have been to that location, we have checked those devices to ensure that what they are measuring is indeed correct, and the customer is not being robbed, and you as a business owner is not giving away your product either. So it covers both the retailer as well as the customer, because to us they all are customers, right, involved in trade. Now, we are planning to expand some services in metrology along the lines of calibrating medical equipment, along the lines of things like stethoscope and sphygmometers, things used for blood pressure and heart palpitation readings, etc. We want to get into electrical meter calibration. We also want to get into the gaming industry, where we want to calibrate some of those machines that you play the slots, what we call the slot machines. We want to get into testing of aggregates in terms of what is used on the roads and in construction generally, testing cement, steel, blocks, ensure that they have the right quality and standard to avoid any catastrophes. So these are some of the things that we have in our work plan moving forward. And currently we are expanding the metrology lab with funding from the EU and the Caribbean Development Bank to have an accredited lab here in St. Kitts and Nevis for metrology, where we can calibrate our standard weights that we are using to verify others, right? Traditionally, this is an exercise that would have incurred significant amount of money that we would have to send our weights off to another lab, let's say in Jamaica. and that would run us anywhere between 40 to 50,000 US dollars a year. So I'm thinking it's best that if we're able to do that ourselves here in St. Kitts, we can then offer that service to the neighboring islands as well that are closer to us geographically. Now moving on to chemistry. Chemistry is the largest department we have. We do a lot of work in chemistry. All of those alcohol verifications that were used during this COVID-19 pandemic, they were all tested by us. Those that came, of course, to the Bureau, we would have tested those along with the thermometers as well. With chemistry though, we are planning to take it a lot further during the next 2 years, where we are going for ISO 17025 accreditation. That is the top standard laboratory accreditation that all labs worldwide is measured against as a benchmark. So we are looking to go that route with respect to chemistry. And where trade is concerned, we are also trying to update some equipment where we can verify those jams and jellies and the coconut drops and the juices and the iced teas and all of these that our locals make, and try to assist them in getting into the international market. We are aware of what the standard requirements are for some of these countries, so we are here to assist those persons in getting their labels, their calorific values, their sugars and proteins and calories added to their labels correctly, to ensure that when it gets to the borders that we have no issues in terms of trade delays, right? So we're trying to facilitate trade in that aspect. And because we're tied directly to international trade for the Bureau, our lab now is going to take on the role of a trade lab as well, where we would be the ones to verify some of these items or disputes associated with trade of goods coming out of St. Kitts and coming into St. Kitts as well. So we're going to get some equipment. We're getting a gas chromatographer as well as part of the funding construct from the CDB EU under the 11 EDF. That's the European Development Fund, and that piece of equipment is what is going to be used to basically do all what I just mentioned. So we're going to test all the protein contents and stuff of the food using that equipment. We can also use it to test the quality of diesel and gas at the station, and of course, again, we're verifying that you, the customer, is getting the right quality of petrol that you're paying for, and ensuring that the person who is buying it as the company is being sold the right quality grade in bulk as well. So it's more of a verification additive that we have. We have air quality, and I think that is probably one of the most famous departments we have. A lot of persons would have seen us doing a lot of work both in the government sector and the private sector. We do all the gases, well, most of the gases except the CFCs. We also do particulate matter. We do mold, right, as well. And of course, that department, as I said, it's being developed to further enhance some of the additional requests that we would have had that we don't currently have the capabilities to do, things like asbestos testing, as well as the noxious CFC gases that would come off the landfill, that would further inform institutions like physical planning, whether this location that is slated for development would be ideal based on the type of particulate matter and fumes that we would pick up in that particular location from wind drift, etc. And we also plan to put some of these devices in the downtown area, the built-up area as well, to see what type of particles that the patrons would be exposed to. And of course, last but not least, we have standards, where that department, well, not last, but I have microbe as well, but standards deals with ensuring that everything that we do in civil society is controlled by a standard, and that way it improves the quality of life, it improves the risk mitigation to ensure that we don't have anybody doing anything out of context or character to put anybody at harm, whether in the physical aspect or something that you may induce from eating something that is not being dealt with properly using a standard. We have 7 standards that we have adopted for the first time. So we have 7 standards currently in SKNIS, and these standards are the packaged water standard. We have the specification for packaged water. We have the labeling of prepackaged food. We have the tourism standard, which is the beach standard, and I think that is one of the areas that we're doing a trial run with the tourism. We have the environmental management standard, and that is for persons who want to consider doing any buildings or want any ideas of how to make sure you go green and you do not impact the environment too much by the dumping and the use of plastics and that type of stuff. So we have a standard that can guide that process. We also have the Caribbean rubric standard, which deals with the conservation energy code, which ensures that anytime you purchase things like refrigerators and air condition, they have that stamp of approval in terms of the environmental impact it would have and the amount of energy that is putting out versus how much you're putting in and what is measured against with your bill, etc. And of course we have the general requirements for goods and we have the specific requirement for goods. The general requirements, we are trying to make that as a technical regulation where we're going to put a regulation in place to ensure that the goods coming into SKNIS must have a country of origin on it, and it also must be in a language, a native language that we can read. And that is, of course, if there's any recalls or if there is any allergens contained on the packaging that you may be allergic to, you must be able to read that and make an informed decision on whether you need to buy it or not. And of course, microbiology, that department deals with testing. We do a lot of work with the Ministry of Health, Water Department, etc. in both SKNIS and NIVIS. And we do a lot of supportive work for restaurants and the water sources and the bottled waters, etc. So we work a lot behind the scenes to ensure that what's being put out there is safe to eat and consume in general. So all in all, that is what we do across all those departments and as that arm of the Bureau of Standards, which is the multipurpose lab.
The department really holds everything together. And in speaking, we're seeing all the different linkages, talking about the safety of food and all of that has to do with really consumer affairs and all of that. Now, Mr. Lawrence, trade has been impacted. Of course, we know because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the concern has been in terms of critical shortages at the national level. Now, we have seen that in terms of, consumer behavior. You have people, panic buying because somehow they feel as though they know that trade is being affected. The ships are not going to come. Are we going to have enough food? Are we going to have enough goods? And so on. And people start to panic. Now, in St. Kitts and Nevis, has there been any sort of export prohibitions and restrictions? And how really have we weathered the storm in terms of trade during this COVID-19 pandemic?
That's a very interesting question. As you can see, we have done a good job in terms of chartering the waters through this pandemic. But I want to touch on something though, because the government policy has never been to stop cargo. So panic shopping and panic buying was basically based on false fears. So ships were coming in, and the shelves, supermarket shelves, have been always been stocked with food. So that has never been an issue in terms of trade. What we have done though within the region, from an OSS standpoint of view, what we have done to facilitate trade and certain what we call essential goods, we have done what we can at the policy level to move certain essential goods, hand sanitizer, etc., to move those goods seamlessly. So without any policy restriction, etc., to get those goods move between borders. So that was done. We also had meetings at the OSS level and CARICOM level. We also had meetings with at customs as well too, to go through what we consider to be essential goods. So we had that meeting. What we did also was to make sure these particular items move without any restrictions in terms of tariff, etc. So we have done that and continue to do so. So on the trade side, we have done a good job, so to speak. But to go further, you touch on something when you spoke about standards being everything. Trade is done via standards, of course. Even within the pandemic situation, standards had to be put in place for trade to continue. And as you see, as economies were closed, so to speak, you can see the effects or the importance of facilitating trade. And therefore, it brought about a fear in terms of goods, services, and of course, people. We don't trade just because we can trade. There's always a means to an end. Trade at the end of the day must have an impact on the socio-economic life of that specific country. So at the end of the day, we trade because we want to basically expand our markets. We want to be able to sell our goods and also to buy our goods. One of the things, for example, when you walk into a supermarket, you see things on the shelves from coffee, chicken, even this equipment that we're looking at. Those are results of trade facilitating trade. One of the things I want to touch on as well too, apart, what we're doing also trade is also to enhance training, capacity building in all areas. For example, we will contact certain organizations to bring training for agro processors. From the customs side end of things, you can bring in experts on the WTO, the World Trade Organization, to build capacity to build. So so when we trade, we know what we're doing and why we're doing what we are doing. For example, you have training in services. For example, there's the economic partnership agreement. So how do we take advantage of that specific agreement? So we have experts coming to actually to build our knowledge. And if you're going to trade your services, you must know what is required. You must know what standard is required to trade your services. You must know what rates you have as well too. For example, if you move your goods, you must know, or you want to basically to sell your services, you must know what the barriers are and how you can overcome these specific barriers. So those are the things that we do in trade. From the standard point of view, what we are looking at as well too, let me say this, one of the things that came out of coming out of this COVID situation, you're going to hear terms like resilience, food security. Those are words that we take seriously in trade. we take seriously in trade. Food security is an issue. So trade covers everything. Goods, services, don't get big or small, from the small man to the largest man. So we must know what this issue are and what is and how it impacts every sector, from the tourism sector to touring, to taxi man, to the person selling mangoes on the street. Right. So we must know how everyone is affected in terms of trade. So what we do basically is to look at these specific issues and how we can mitigate any situation that will affect them to sell their product or to make a living. So at the end of the day, what we do is to make sure that any action taken, it brings about the government policy in terms of poverty alleviation, create employment, and things of that nature. So that's basically from my end.
But right, so we can talk about trade on the international level, and we can talk about trade in terms even on the local level. And trade has been affected because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it has been affected because trade depends on the transport sector.
Exactly.
And the transport sector, transport and manufacturing sector, those are two sectors that have been affected because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And because they have been affected, trade has been affected as well. For example, the people who trade their business in the tourism industry, they have not been able to do so because, of course, people are not coming.
That is one of the major impacts that therefore SKNIS and NIS will globally. Once people can't move, then you're gonna feel the impact of it. For example, those of us who are tourism dependent are going to feel it a lot more. In fact, I don't want to say tourism dependent because even moving agricultural products, because the key thing is transportation. Because what the effects of the pandemic was transportation, so to speak. And if you have a lockdown or a curfew, then the revenue expected will not be there. If revenues are coming in, it doesn't mean your expense fall. So you're going to have layoff, businesses are going to close down. So what you've seen the government attempting to do in the efforts is to continue to facilitate trade. So they're looking at opening the borders again. So not just to, like I say, is to stimulate basically the economy, and that's what trade does. So those are the measures that are being looked at. Then you spoke about the manufacturing sector as well too. SKNIS and NIS has a very unique situation. Our enclaving sector is huge, and when you look at the employment in the enclaving sector, the vast majority are females. So now you begin to look at the social impact, and then you begin to see how that translates into stimulus packages. It's going to have an effect on the government purse. So now we're seeing things that open up. We're seeing most people are back out to work. Things are beginning to pick up slowly but surely. So the manufacturing sector, apart from tourism, have taken a serious hit as well too. But like you said, we have and continue to weather the storm carefully, as well as carefully. It's because it's a global pandemic. So even if we are ready, if others are not ready, you have to still take cautions in the steps that we make. So within trade, there's a balance between the economic impact that we have to mitigate. At the same time, we still want to stimulate the economy to create jobs and to create employment. We have to eat, And apart from that as well, from the pandemic, we're also in a hurricane season. So we're also looking at that as well too. Simple things, the last hurricane we had, when the Dominican boat couldn't come, you go to the supermarket, there was a shortage in citrus and bananas and things of that nature. So those are all a part of the importance and the impact of trade as well too. So we in the hurricane season, we're keeping our eyes open.
Right. Now, Mr. Lawrence, there's a question I want to ask you before I move on to Mr. Quealy. We have successfully ratified the CARIFORUM EU Economic Partnership Agreement and really the redrafting of the EPA implementation bill. How are we capitalizing on the many benefits of this agreement, the CARIFORUM EU Economic Partnership Agreement?
The Economic Partnership Agreement is comprehensive. So it includes all goods, services, and investment as well too. What we have done to make sure that we in SKNIS are capitalizing and taking advantage of this agreement, as I said before, we have had experts in trading services, trade lawyers, so to speak, to come in here, and we've had training at the national level and at the regional level, actually done here in SKNIS. So what we've done, we've taken even success stories and had these persons give their own experiences. So, and we continue to have these training and exposure to, for our nationals to take advantage of the agreement. But first of all, if you have to know what the agreement is, what's in there for you to take advantage of. So we continue to have what we call awareness and education of the agreement to the public. Apart from that, to ensure that we take advantage of the agreement, we also look at our policies as well too. So we have to ensure that our policies can facilitate the trade. For example, we have to look at e-commerce. We may have a provision in the EPA to take advantage of e-commerce. However, our national law may not allow or facilitate this particular trade in this particular in a specific mode. So what we do, sometimes we go through the laws as a legal expert to do what you call a legal scan, scrub, etc., to look at these specific laws and see what we can do to bring these laws up to date so we can now take advantage of these specific agreements. So that's ongoing. It has never stopped.
Okay. Now, Mr. Quealy, the man responsible for the Consumer Affairs Department. Now the Consumer Affairs Department has the mandate of informing and educating and empowering consumers to really protect themselves in the marketplace. Now, we have seen over the past few months changes in consumer behavior, lifestyle, especially given the COVID-19 pandemic, and how consumers have to think about their own health and safety. How has the Consumer Affairs Department worked along with the Ministry of Health in ensuring the safety and the health of the consumer within the marketplace?
Well, on a weekly basis, our officers go into the field along with health inspectors, and we conduct various inspections at these supermarkets to ensure that the items on the shelf are fit for human consumption. All items which are expired, dented, they are removed from the shelves. The health inspectors, they have the authority to remove them from the premises, as we do not. So they would discard of them. That's the major aspect of making sure that persons are safe when consuming items or purchasing items for consumption. Outside of that, there hasn't been much change, as you mentioned, from what we could see in terms of consumer behavior in terms of spending and purchasing the items.
Right.
What we saw in the beginning was persons were really purchasing a lot of items out of fear that the ships would stop coming. Mm-hmm. We have not seen that over the past months, and we do not anticipate that happening. What we saw from the U.S. side was that there was some shortages being created because of meat packaging plants having the COVID-19 virus infecting some of its workers, and they had to cease operations for a little bit or try to restrict they were trying to contain the virus. So the processing of the meats was limited, and the prices began to go up in the U.S. market.
Right. Mr. Quealy, I know that there has been some work started on a CARICOM consumer protection bill. Do you have any update on that? From 2015, we started doing some serious work on the consumer protection bill because we realized that the legislation that we have right now is somewhat inadequate. Markets change, and we would have to adapt to these changes legislatively. Right now, the document has gone through a series of edits. It's currently at the AG's chambers for review, and we've also sent it out to the Chamber of Industry and Commerce for feedback, because we would not want to just pass it through the Parliament without it going to relevant stakeholders for their feedback. We anticipate sometime during this year, 2020, hopefully, that we could have it up for first reading. And I would also like to say that in connection with this new legislation, it would change the way in which we do business here dramatically. For one, persons once, as I had outlined earlier, persons who are found in breach of various sections of the Act, they could now face fines and penalties right on the spot. So if you have expired items on your shelves, we could fine you probably $50 per item. And that's just an example of a price at the moment. So we're looking to really ramp up the enforcement of the department, and not just have the department as more of like where they're basically doing a service to remove the items from the store shelves, while the store employees themselves are not actually doing that. Now, with respect to stores, supermarkets, and so on, what has been done by the department to really get feedback from the consumers? I know that you go out and you do your inspections and all of that, but how do you get feedback from the consumers, and what do you do with that feedback?
Well, periodically we conduct surveys about various issues that might be happening in society to get the consumer's perspective on certain matters. We might issue maybe like 500 surveys on a given topic. They complete them. And based on the information collected, we would then analyze it and create a cabinet submission if we notice that there is a justified problem that we need to fix. It could be from terrible service with internet, your phone service is poor. Right now, as I mentioned earlier in the program, we are currently preparing to undertake a survey as to how small businesses have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. With this information, we will create a cabinet submission and outline our findings. and our recommendations as to whether the government should intervene and offer some sort of package to small businesses to keep them viable or in business, because we cannot afford to have all our small businesses go down the drain. So that is the way in which we use these surveys to really get feedback from the public and inform the policy level.
And it really goes back again to standards. Even though you have a small business and so on, the business must operate according to certain standards. For example, I was taught that when I buy something, I must have some sort of a receipt or to prove that I would have bought a product. But a lot of small businesses, you don't get a receipt. Suppose something, you take that good home and then you realize something is wrong with it and you want to take it back.
That is another.
I can say, well, I bought it here. But the person can say, you didn't buy this here. And I really have nothing in my hand to say that this is where I bought the product.
That would go back to the Consumer Protection Act that we are trying to introduce. All of these aspects will be covered in that document. Persons would be required to issue receipts. I know some persons may have an issue with it because it may cause them to go into expense which they don't have or they don't want to spend. But in order to advance the business environment here in St. Kitts, we need to start looking at a lot of different ways in which we could really beef up protection to the consumers so that they would understand that they're getting value for money. Nobody's trying to rob them, cheat them out of anything. So, yeah, this is part of the new legislation. You would be required to have receipts issued. I know at this moment some people have these little, I don't even want to call it a receipt. It is just a little piece of paper with some numbers on it. So that is not sufficient for what it is we're trying to accomplish going forward.
It's not even from the point of view that I am thinking that you're trying to rob me. It's just that I need to have proof of purchase. That I would have purchased this and where I would have purchased it, what day I would have purchased it, when I would have purchased it, from my own records. It is not that I'm suspicious of you, that you want to rob me, that I am not, that you are conducting business, you're not conducting business in good faith, but it is my right as the consumer to have that proof of purchase.
That is true.
It's a basic right any consumer really has. Mr. Brown, industry, commerce, small business development. Very heavy there. Now, in terms of manufacturing, industries, and so on, we have seen that that has been affected as well, given the COVID-19 pandemic. Here in the Federation, it has been affected, and it has been affected globally. What is being done in St. Kitts in terms of the manufacturing industries to try to get them back up running and so on again?
All right, thank you, Lesroy. And you realize that as each one of us would have made a presentation or intervention, it simply highlighted the complementary work that we do. And as such, you know, we all will work together in a way, serving the same set of people, because I would question, well, trade, who trades? So we're talking about manufacturers, we're talking about small businesses, etc. We are aware that there has been some impact, but as Mr. Lawrence, I think earlier, would have alluded to, I think we would have done as good a job as we could have done in terms of ensuring that we look at the components we have here. Now we have policy. we have people, we have products. It's a 3P regime that I like to look at sometimes. And of course, while we would have had some setbacks in terms of manufacturing, that would have been kind of exacerbated by the fact that people would not have been able to move. Then you are looking at the whole retraining and retooling of our businesses. So as you look at the activities of the ministry, you realize that all would come together to ensure that we are able to not only survive the difficult period, but to move on with things like retraining. Now, the SBDC, Small Business Development Center, as I would have indicated earlier, would, for all intents and purposes, pull together a series of training sessions. I mean, we would have done some earlier. Things like credit and financial analysis, so that, you know, participants, persons, business people can analyze financial statements, at least from the perspective of the banker, and to see whether they can get, you know, funding, etc. We had the breakthrough series. Again, that would have been providing entrepreneurs with tools and strategies to respond in this particular environment, the COVID pandemic climate. And of course, we're looking at the use of social media for business success. I mean, to move beyond just the likes, but to actually turn these platforms into, leverage these platforms so that, you know, businesses can move on. What we have seen is a couple of things emerging. One, while, you know, our production activities and so on is, I would say, recommencing. We did quite a bit to make sure that our manufacturers and our small business people were able to gradually go back to business. Well, it's not business as usual, but we note that we would have seen a lot of the development of the online, the e-commerce activity. Coupled with that, we would have seen some delivery activity. It is one of the areas that, you know, we are pretty certain. We don't have people moving, but as we always say, you know, people have to eat. Services would have to be provided. And so we are, in fact, strengthening and trying to build capacity for our manufacturers, our service providers in those areas where they can continue to be productive. It certainly would take some doing in terms of getting our people to participate in training activities, to take advantage of what is, you know, placed on the table so that they can enhance and improve the way they operate. We are aware that the e-commerce activities would have been something that we would have been looking at for some time now. We do have e-commerce legislation, etc. And so even things like getting paid for your services, the payment platforms, etc., it is in fact the way to go, the new norm. And while I'm not able to use this particular program as a training activity, what I would want to suggest to our business people, our small business people, our entrepreneurs, our manufacturers, is that they participate in things like surveys. Now, we cannot, and the government would not be able to just provide for your needs if we don't know what those needs are. We realize that our people would have, you know, in a lot stayed away from participating in surveys, participating in little programs and so on. where you can provide the information as to how we can help to develop policy, as to how we can put things in place to ensure that a post-COVID business environment would have the proper support of government, of the agencies that are so designed to provide this kind of support. It is really not possible to have it done and to have these interventions without at least knowing what the needs of our entrepreneurs are and having their input. One of the other areas, I mean, and as it relates to e-commerce, we are seeing all the meetings, everybody's having a meeting by Zoom. And so, again, it is important for our entrepreneurs, our business people, to take advantage of the training, equip yourself. Government would in fact be providing certain things to ensure that you can acquire the correct equipment and all that kind of stuff. You know, incentives and packages, etc., would assist you to acquire that type of equipment. But it's important for us to look at how we transform, we get into the e-commerce activity, our meetings, our deliveries, just all of it, to ensure that we can in fact participate in the global environment, the global business environment as we move forward. Like I would have indicated, it's not business as usual, but you have to look for new markets. How do you access them? Look at niche marketing, etc. How do we provide for certain areas? And it is just all important as our ministry would work together, the various departments, to ensure that we can in fact move our entrepreneurs and our manufacturers, our small businesses, small enterprises to the next stage, which is post-COVID-19.
Right. Now, Mr. Brown, do you have any statistics in terms of the number of manufacturing companies that we have here in the Federation and the number of small to medium-sized enterprises registered in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis?
With me, not exact statistics. However, what I can say to you that over the last 5 years, we would have seen in excess of 300 small business persons accessing the services provided by our small business unit, formerly the National Entrepreneurial Development Division, and they really would have been accessing various services that we provide, which I would have outlined before. Of course, we are also focusing on our manufacturers, that we tend to, when we say manufacturers, you know, there would have been at least the tendency to look at the companies, the entities on the industrial side. But I think one of my colleagues would have referenced our agro-processors, our smaller manufacturers, and in fact, we would have created a space. We would have been looking at policy to ensure that we also take care of those smaller entities, and so that they can see themselves as manufacturers as well, and you know, be a part of that regime that would ensure their success. So to answer your question directly, I don't have the statistics with me immediately, but what I can say to you, there are hundreds of entrepreneurs, small businesses, who would have been accessing our services and still looking for that type of assistance post-COVID-19.
Okay, it would seem to me that given this climate that we are in, with people losing their jobs, having reduced work and so on, that the small business, people starting small businesses sector is really the way to go in terms of stimulating the local economy. It is one of the ways to go, really. Okay, we are going to go to the phone lines and see if there are people who want to call in and ask you some questions. The numbers to call are 466-2666, 466-2666, 662-8674, 662-8674, 767-4765, 767-4765, and the overseas number is 1-239-645-4500. We await your calls. Right. So, Mr. Laplace, I know that you came to the NEOC on a few occasions and basically doing what you do best in terms of talking about the standards and so on, compliance with standards. Now, sanitizers. I know you bought some sanitizers and you were talking about the standards and so on. Have you found that there have been breaches to the standards in terms of hand sanitizers in St. Kitts and Nevis? That people are just putting something out there to say they're sanitizers, but they're not really effective.
Well, that would be a tough one. We can only verify what we have tested, but we are hoping that persons are following the protocols that we suggested in terms of the dilution ratios and all of that. Because remember, we mentioned in the case with dealing with COVID, for instance, it's not about the strength of the alcohol being a high percentage that makes it effective. It's the fact that you can keep that alcohol in a liquid state long enough for it to make enough contact with your hands. So that is one of the reasons why it is important to ensure that when you are diluting that that product with water, that you keep in mind that it has to be within that 60 to 70% range in terms of percentage to ensure that it is effective for use in the hand sanitizing process. Now, you have to also take into account that persons like to add things like tea tree oil and lemongrass and all of that, and there is a specific mixing procedure and instructions that go along with this to ensure that in addition to the water that you're adding, you do not further dilute that product by adding those different extracts. Because at the end of the day, you will just have something that smells good on your hands, but it's not effective in terms of what the intent was really designed for. So,
not killing the virus.
Well, it's not inactivating the virus, yes.
Now, Mr. Lawrence, the CARICOM single market and economy, as you are aware, is critical within CARICOM and the region. How do you see the COVID-19 pandemic affecting the CARICOM single market and economy?
The single market and economy, how has the COVID-19 affected it? From my desk, it has only affected it in the way in terms of movement of people. Because within the single market and economy, you have the movement of people, goods, and services. So goods continue to move and services continue to move. But in terms of people itself, it has only been affected in terms of people. Because as you realize, the borders remain closed for people to travel. The policies that, of course, you cannot stop a national family from returning home, and that is done via a chartered aircraft. So But in terms of the goals of the SKNIS single market and economy, it is still being achieved, you know, because at the end of the we are looking at basically to basically have a more knitted union among CARICOM member states. So in terms of policies, etc., those things are still being worked on. Mr. Bong had mentioned earlier the use of the internet. So even during the 24-hour lockdown, we still had Zoom meetings going on. The world doesn't stop, you know. So during the 24-hour lockdown, the shift system, we still had meetings, the use of Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and some others I can't recall at the moment. But the goal and the work of the SKNIS still continues. People are still free to apply for skill certificate. You know, we're still facilitating trade amongst CARICOM member states. Quartet itself still continues to meet. That's the Council on Trade and Economic Development, the ministerial meeting. OSS still continue to meet within the context of the CARICOM single market and economy. So we still continue to meet. We still continue to strive to deal with issues at the regional level. Meetings still continue to proceed, I should say, to continue. What at the regional level, though, within the CSME, you know, issues that the pandemic highlights, I want to say it basically kind of give us, instead of a carrot, it give us a stick. So when you're hoping to do certain things down the road, achieve certain things down the road, you kind of have to do it now. So policies have to be put in place. It can speed up policy and decision making. So meetings had to come fast and hurry. The work had to still continue, but at a faster pace. So you highlight weak areas that must be dealt with. Even when you look at trade, there are four modalities of trade. And one of those under what we call mode 1 is basically the movement of this particular service. So then you begin to realize we need more bandwidth. We need to work on this X-rays. We need to do this like now. You know, you begin to look at regional transportation, and of course, that's a major issue for us, regional transportation. Not just air transport, but sea transport as well too. You know what's going on with the LIAT and you know, other entities looking to enter the market, etc., things of that nature. So those are things that affect the SKNIS movement, regional integration. That's the key word, regional integration. So those are things that have been ironed out, meetings that are still going on. It has not slowed down. It has actually speeded up. So that's one of the benefits. But like I said, it kind of gave us, instead of a carrot, it gave us a stick. So things that you thought you had more time on, you realize, okay, no, we have to do something quick, fast, and in a hurry. You know, and as you know, like I said, once people don't move, services don't necessarily move because it affects people's ability to provide for themselves. The economic and socio-economic impact is real. So now we have to put things in place, policies in place, infrastructure in place to continue to provide for ourselves economically. So you highlight our weaknesses, internet infrastructure, our ability to communicate, our ability to provide for ourselves. Like I said earlier, the term resilience and sustainable is a keywords that now have become so important in how we look at policies. We're talking about backyard farming, but we don't just go to backyard farming to be resilient or to provide for yourself. From a trade perspective, we want to move from a backyard farmer to actually becoming a lucrative and sustainable entity. So those are things that must be put in the forefront. Regional integration is still on the move. That has never been stopped. Issues at the minister level, those still continue. The ministers still meet, you know. And I would like say as that and the I don't want to say and the grass level, I will say, so to speak. Movement of people, skills, etc. Issues there are still being ironed out. People are still free to apply for a skill certificate. Movement of people is still an issue. But you know, the borders are closed for people to travel. We, as I know, we're looking to open up the borders again. But the goals and the aims of the CSME and regional integration still are on the government agenda and priority. In fact, it's actually more necessary and more important as a region to move with one goal in mind: economic resilience and economic empowerment for our persons as a whole. Because you know, the saying that a chain is as strong as its weakest link. So at the one time you can have a vibrant St. Kitts and Nevis and a weak St. Lucia, because we affect one another. You know, you can't have a strong economy one way and a weak economy the next way. If you look at regional integration, so it must be a level playing field, and one can benefit off of that. We all benefit together. So those issues must be highlighted, and those issues must be dealt with at the national and of course the regional level. So ministers at the beginning still to me, like I say, become more imperative now that regional integration and all the barriers that affect regional integration actually be removed. You know, so those are still being looked at and continue to do so.
Now, Mr. Brown, I know there has been a lot of focus on the manufacturing industry, and we realize what has happened because of the pandemic. The manufacturing industries were closed for a while and so on, because they require people to go in and to work, of course, in an enclosed space and so on, physically. What about stepping up in terms of the footloose industries? We're seeing where this is now ever so much important in terms of getting involved in industry, but the footloose industries, things having to do with technology, the internet, and so on.
All right, this is why, and you are in fact strengthening that point that I may not have made so well. Our persons in business, our business people, our entrepreneurs, our young people, in fact, we've seen them gravitating to that area. We've seen them gravitating to doing stuff online that would in fact change the way business is being done. We are looking at our entertainers. I mean, you know, when you are producing music, you're hoping that some way, somehow, when you hear it being played, you're making some money. And, you know, all of those platforms in terms of how people download your music, how you get paid for it, those are the things that of course, we are paying some serious attention to as we look closely at the whole e-commerce regime. Now, as a matter of fact, the WTO has in fact been looking that direction as well. And those of us who have a little, you know, idea as to what would happen in that trade world, some small business people would kind of resent the WTO looking in their direction. But it is in fact one of the benefits where we can now kind of formalize and bring into mainstream the activities of our smaller operators or entrepreneurs, but in a way that they can go global, that they can fit into that whole e-commerce online space. So as we speak, as a matter of fact, I left a regional discussion meeting via VC, of course, and came straight here. And that, in fact, was the topic, e-commerce, trading activity. Good.
Okay, now we have to be wrapping up. I give all four of you, starting with Mr. Laplace, any additional thing that you would like to say? Wrap up.
Yeah, I think I said most of what I wanted to say initially. Just to add that, of course, as I said, we support trade. We are intrinsically linked. We are the focal point for a lot of international organizations out there as it relates to standards and technical barriers to trade, even the WTO. So we work behind the scenes to ensure that everything runs smoothly. And of course, our national obligations are met as well with relation to food and water safety here in St. Kitts. I would just like to encourage persons who want to get into the business to, of course, visit Mr. Brown's ministry, Small Business Development, and that would help in terms of getting you further along in terms of what you need or what you would require. So if you go there and you're planning to get into the food business or you want to make a deodorant or something like that to assist you in terms of not making the mistakes, you should you know, go through the procedure and ensure that you get the right advice from us before you move forward. So that is just an example of some of the things that we'd like to see moving forward here in St. Kitts. Right. Thank you.
And Mr. Laplace, I know you're party to a number of conventions and so on, which we can't get into right here right now. The Stockholm Convention and the Minimatter and so on. But
lots and lots.
Lots of conventions to ensure that, you know, you're maintaining those standards and so on.
Correct.
International standards.
Correct.
Mr. Lawrence.
Well, I just want to encourage everybody and telling everybody that international trade is you and I. It affects every aspect of our society. But just to highlight some key things that we're working on going forward, we'll continue to work on the Economic Partnership Agreement. We know we have Brexit, so now it becomes a UK instead of a carry-forward agreement. We have the CSME, we also have the OECS movement, of course. We also have a trade facilitation agreement, which we continue to work on. The doing business ranking is an issue that we continue to work on. The National Coalition of Services Industries, that we are continuing to work on as well too. Agriculture is one of the key areas that we're keeping our eye on. We need to feed ourselves. And goods and services is how we basically feed ourselves in terms of trade. So we continue to do our work to make sure that Sakers and Davis remain resilient and we find our niche in the global market chain. Yes.
Mr. Quealy.
From Affairs Department perspective, I would just like to encourage persons to shop smartly, look at your expiration dates on the items that you're purchasing. If you see a deal that looks like it's too good to be true, it most likely is. The item might be possibly close to the expiration date and you don't even know it, so you need to check that closely. We will continue our work at the department to intertwine ourselves with various agencies across the government. Right now we are trying to see how we can do some work with the Ministry of Finance to get involved in the business licensing by the means of being a part of creating a process where persons would have to be going through an inspection process before they are verified for business licenses. So that is just one of the ways where we were trying to advance the department going forward. But as I said, shop smart, ask for a discount. Thank you very much.
Mr. Brown.
Yeah, we would just want to, we at SBDC would want to encourage our entrepreneurs, our small business persons, our manufacturers to link with us, participate in the surveys and the studies that we are doing. Of course, it is intended to serve you better. We with our linkages, well, locally, regionally, internationally, would provide you with that bigger brother space, that hand-holding type service, that virtual type assistance that is necessary for growth in a post-COVID environment. So we are not alone, and we intend not to leave you alone either. We are all in this together. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank all four of you. You know that you are a part of a very important ministry, International Trade and Industry and Commerce and Consumer Affairs, because that goes to the heart of the economic growth of any country, of course, gross domestic product and so on, economic growth, which then translates itself into economic development. So that ministry plays a key role in terms of economic, sustainable, really, and human development. So I want to thank all four of you, Mr. Laplace, Director of the St. Kitts and Nevis Bureau of Standards. Thank you, Mr. Laplace. Thanks to Mr. Philip, Director of the Department of Industry, Commerce and Small Business Development, very crucial. And Mr. Sean Lawrence, Director of Trade, and Mr. Paul Quealy, Director of the Consumer Affairs Department. Thank you for appearing on today's program, and I'm sure it won't be the last time. You will be back at some other point to share all the good news that you're doing in your department. I want to thank all of our callers, all of our listeners. Well, we didn't have any callers today, really. I want to thank all of our listeners to today's program. When we don't have any callers, it really means that the panelists have done such a good work in explaining themselves that they leave no questions at all to the audience. Next week, we will be back for another edition of Working for You. Until then, I am Les Roy Williams. Take care.